Good morning, everyone. Again, nice to see, lovely to see. And welcome as usual. And we'll start with a short mindful breathing practice meditation to quiet our mind, watching the breath mindfully. And we can try to generate good intentions by thinking, by us coming here together, giving our precious time to listen and discussing, engaging, reflecting, contemplating. May all of this become cause and conditions to improve our mind, our attitude, our practice. May it become cause and conditions supportive to become more patient, more kind, more compassion, more wise. May it become cause and condition to have less strong desire, impatience, frustration, anger, ignorance, so forth. And may it become cause and conditions to achieve our own highest potential, the fully awakened state, so that we can fulfill the high purpose of others and oneself. So we can be source of temporary and ultimate happiness to each and every sentient beings. And never engage in any hurtful, harmful actions. And by hearing those teachings, may it inspire us to actually implement them in our everyday life as much as possible. Okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create will listen to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Geshe Sherab Sanju Padavadane Geshe Sherab Lama Atisha Geshe Sherab Sanju Padavadane Geshe Sherab Lama Atisha. So I think we are kind of coming to the end of this particular mind training text by the great Master Atisha. I think probably this week, by next week, we will be completing this particular mind training text, and which is full of, very practical, very beneficial, helpful, as well as very extensive and profound instructions, advices, teachings, that can be very, very helpful and beneficial in our life if we can, if we are able to apply them, if we do apply them and really practice them. So, in the last week, we kind of ended, is page number 3, and it's the where we stop, where he advised to be as much as generous as we can, in our life, and because we can be generous. We can be generous, and we can be even more generous as well, and being generous is helping others as well as helping ourselves, training our mind, instead of being so holding so tightly, kind of learning to relax your mind, to be more kind of, loosening of that from holding too tightly, and so, and it also is through the practice of generosity, when we really try to give and support from our heart, it is also like pouring water to our own basic nature, altruistic intentions, love, compassion. It helps us love and compassion to grow. It inspires the love and compassion to grow. So it is not only helping and benefiting others, but it is also helping ourselves, our own mind. Because it requires kind of training. Without a training, we always feel that we don't have enough to give, or we don't have enough to give more. That's how we always feel, That's how we will feel. We feel that even when we are very little, and we feel same way even when we have more, the mind doesn't change, the feeling of that there's not enough for me to share, or to give, or to practice the generous. And that can only shift only if we train our mind. It doesn't come naturally for most people. That mind is not going to come if you have more, unless we really train our mind to do that and really practice, if we don't mind, if we don't train, then, we feel the same way. Even if you become millionaire, you still feel, I don't have enough to give or to give more. And same mental mindset. Even if you become billionaire, you still feel that way, same. And so, we have to train and change that attitude, and instead feeling, there is more than there's more. I have more than enough to share, to give. I have more than enough to give a little bit more. So that is how we train our mind to practice the generosity. The feeling of abundance, richness inside. So that is and then at the very end of that verse, the third line where it says, "And banish all feeling or in there," And so here, the advice is to not to have any kind of feeling of jealousy or envy towards someone's success, towards someone's happiness, towards someone's, virtues, instead, instead of jealousy and envy, instead learning to be happy, joyful with someone's success, with someone's happiness, with someone's virtues. So, because the mind of the jealousy or envy is a miserable mind. It's a miserable mind because when you see someone's success, happiness, and virtues, feeling, sense of unhappy about that, feeling that it's not happening to me and it's happening to someone else, feeling that, sense of feeling that it should be happening to me, not that, and not being happy with that is happening with someone else and not me, or in my life. Instead, it's happening to someone's life, and so that kind of miserable feeling or attitude of that envy, jealousy is not helpful, beneficial, to anyone. By wishing that, it's not going to change the situation. It's not going to make that person's happiness to come to yourself. It's not going to make that person's virtues to come to you. It's not going to make someone's success happening to yourself by feeling that way, So it's not going to change that, but you feel very, unpleasant and miserable because of that, And we don't want to be miserable. Nobody wants to be miserable. So if we don't want to be miserable, then, we try to overcome all those different attitudes and mental state that make us unhappy and miserable. And one of those mental state or attitudes that make us miserable and unhappy is that kind of jealousy mind, that kind of envy mind. So to encounter that jealousy and envy mind, then we try to apply the virtues, the antidote of rejoicing in someone's, rejoicing in someone's success, rejoicing in someone's happiness, rejoicing in someone's virtues, being happy with that. Just like, if you have, your most beloved children or your most beloved whatever, friends, families, when you see their success, you feel more joy than your own success. When you see their happiness, you feel more happy than as though it is your own happiness. When you see their virtues, you feel even more happy than to see your own virtues. That kind of, we have the ability to do that. Just as we can feel for some people, certain individual, we have the capacity, ability to feel that for everyone's. And that, if we can feel that, then, we don't have to be so miserable a lot of time because of that kind of jealousy in their mind. Instead, we can be so happy to see that, so joyful to see that. So then, it makes your mind so peaceful, joyful, happy, cheerful, instead of being miserable and unhappy. And so it is in our hand, how we train our mind. If we train our mind to rejoice, then we can be much more happy, And if we look from karmic point of view, then we create so much also positive karma through your rejoicing in someone's happiness, someone's success, someone's virtues. Not only it make you so joyful and happy in that moment, but it also creates so much of virtues, so much of positive karma. On the other hand, when we have feeling of jealousy and envy, not only we feel miserable and unhappy in that moment, but it also creates negative karma, non-virtues and negative karma. So, and of course, we don't want to feel unhappy and miserable, neither we want to create negative karma and non-virtues, and so we try all our best. First, to not to have that kind of jealous and envy feelings, and if it does arises, instead recognizing it and then trying to, there's no point of me being jealous and envy. Instead, I should rejoice. Instead, I should be happy with that. And then, directing our mind and transforming and training our mind and directing to be more happy and joyful and rejoicing in that. That's how it. And we try to rejoice from any point of view. From one point of view, especially for those who have the inspirations to follow the Bodhisattva path, who are kind of dedicated to follow the Bodhisattva path, and especially if we have taken a, Bodhisattva vows and so forth, we commit ourselves, we dedicate ourselves to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, to work for the happiness of all sentient beings. That is what when we take the Bodhisattva vows. That is when we try to follow the Bodhisattva path. That is what it is. The Bodhisattva path is to work for the benefit of others. When you have some kind of inspirations to follow that path, the inspiration to follow that particular path, that is to work for the benefit of others, for the happiness of others. That being the case, that being our commitment, that being our inspirations, that being the one to whom we have dedicated. When someone is able to find their own happiness, success, shouldn't we be so happy instead of being miserable about that? This is something you have taken responsibility to do that, and then they themselves is able to find happiness. They themselves is able to find success. They themselves is able to engage in the virtues, something that you have taken responsibility to direct in that direction, and when they are able to, you should be, so happy, that without you putting so much effort, without you taking all this, they are able to do themselves. And from that kind of, analysis, from that kind of contemplations, from that kind of meditations, we try to feel good, happy, and joyful when we see happiness, success, virtues happening in someone's life, any being's life, and so through there's one way how we try to, and the jealousy or the envy mind come through attachments. It's through attachments. The cause of such feeling is the attachments. When I'm attached to certain reputations of fame, and instead of me getting the reputation of fame, someone gets the fame and reputation, then you feel jealousy and envy about that. When we are attached, when we are very attached to our own happiness, when you see someone happy and you are not happy, then you feel jealous and envy, for someone's happiness. You feel, instead of being happy with someone's happiness, you feel miserable because you are so attached to it, and instead of it happening to you, it is happening to someone else and not to you. And same thing, when we're so attached to some kind of virtues. So again, same thing, when someone engages in the virtues, instead of being joyful and happy, you feel jealous and envy. Instead, I should be the one who is doing that virtues, and why it is not me and the others. So that kind of, and so it comes through the attachments. So as we can see, many of those miserable, harmful, unhealthy attitude, feelings, thoughts arises from attachments. And the feeling of jealousy or envy is one of them that arises from the attachments. And again, what we from that, what we realize is, attachment is really, really one of the main root of all our miserable feelings and attitude and source of suffering to oneself and others, source of problem for oneself and others. So again, that also again points why we need to work with our attachment, to have less attachment, or to have less strong attachment, intense attachment. The need to work, because as long as we have attachment, it will give rise to all those different emotions, such as jealousy, pride, and all others, many others, greediness, miserliness, or many others, those different feelings, negative emotions, feelings. So again, working with our attachment, so important, so crucial. By dealing with that, we can be, when we are able to reduce the attachment, the level of attachments, we can reduce many of those other negative emotions, such as jealousy and pride, that arises because of attachments. So that is one. The cause of what lead to the jealousy is the attachments. And the jealousy feeling itself, the mind itself, is very unhappy, very miserable. And that feeling of miserable or unhappy mind lead to, non-virtuous act, either to do mental actions or verbal and physical actions, so therefore, we need to work so that we don't have that kind of negative feelings or attitude as much as possible. And when it does arise, let's try to apply the antidote to reduce it, to destroy it, to overcome it. So that is the advice here, okay? And banish all feeling of envy. So that the next one, the advice is, so as to protect others' peace of mind, stay clear of quarrel of any kind. Another wonderful advice. Not only to protect someone's peaceful mind, to protect your own peaceful mind. When you get in an argument and quarrel, not only it disturbs someone's mind, then it will disturb your mind. It disturbs everyone's mind. And sometimes, we feel like we need to express our opinion all the time. I don't think it's necessary all the time, And that is where all the argument comes. We have to think, is there a meaning by sharing my opinion, because I have different opinion than your opinion? Is it going to solve the problem? Am I going to change that person's mind? Is it going to make the things better? That is very important, I think, to me, that it's not about, my view might be based on truth, or at least I believe it is based on truth, sometimes even we believe it is based on truth, sometimes it is not always the case. But even supposedly your view is based on fact and true, but just by expressing my different opinion to someone who has a different opinion, is this going to make beneficial or helpful? Is this going to help? That is the thing. If we can change that person's, by sharing that, if we can change that person's view, then of course there is some benefit in that. If we can change that person's view, then of course by sharing that, if we are going to change the situations, whatever of that, if there's going to be some help and benefit, then there is a benefit. But sometimes it doesn't help. We are unable to change the person's perceptions. We are unable to change the situation itself, but it only makes other person more upset, more angry, make their view even more stronger. And disturb their mind, and then they become very defensive. And as a way of defensive, they become very offensive. As I mentioned before, when you become a defensive, then that is when we become offensive. And I mentioned that is same with animals. Their way of defending is attack the others. And we human beings have similar way of doing that. When we feel we are being threatened by someone's, whatever way, and we become very defensive. And the way of being defensive is attack the other persons. And then, because someone's attacking us, we become upset and angry. So at the end, it disturbs both yourself and other person's peaceful mind. It disturbs our mind. It creates more distance and more divisions between that person and yourself. And is that what you want? Is that what you want? That is something we have to think. Is that what you want? If we don't want that, if that is not something we want, that is not something that we wish, then I think, we'll be more mindful, careful, and not to get in argument. And a lot of time we don't start the argument because we want to argue, Do you get it what I mean? Especially with your friends, when you are having a nice time, and because you want to see that friend, and you have not seen, and you want to see that friend, or you want to go and visit a friend, and then you started some conversation, and then you begin to have different view on that, and you started to someone share their view, and then you feel like, oh, you need to share your views or say your views, and then that is where the argument starts. And that is all the argument and quarrel stuff. And then, so that is important for us to be mindful of that, aware of that, mindful of that. And, and it's always contemplating before, be more aware and mindful of our speech, our views, our idea, and how that can affect positively, negatively. And on the basis of that, and then, whether it is important to share our view or whether it is not so important to share our view, and that is something on the basis of that, then we kind of try to, take the actions to say something, not to say something, to point something, not to point something, So that is, I believe that is very important, because sometimes we tend to be very strong about our opinion, our views, kind of very attached to it, kind of very grasping and attached to our opinion and our views. We feel like we have to express, we have to share all the time. That is not always necessarily the case. Sometimes being silent can be much more beneficial and helpful and healing and transformative for others and transformative yourself. Of course, there are times sometimes when you need to say, when you need to express, and that saying is a helpful, beneficial, So that is where, being aware and mindful, and then in that moment, seeing the situations, observing the situation itself, observing the other person's mind, observing our own mind, our own emotions, on the basis of that, then that is, if we kind of engage in the discussions, then that would be more beneficial and healthy. Sometimes we can see the other person's view is very strong, and you can feel it. That person is not going to change their view, their idea, by sharing the opposite or different view of yours. So, when you feel that, when you observe that, when you recognize that, that person's feeling in that moment, that person's strong view on that moment, or whatever, so, sometimes it's not to start the argument. Better not to start the argument. And as I mentioned, starting the argument is not because you wanted to start argument, it's just trying to express your opinion and saying, I don't believe that, or I don't think that is the case, or you are wrong, or this and that, and all of that, that is where the argument starts. That is the way the argument starts, and from that perspective, I really, really appreciate, the Buddha's approach. I feel like Buddha's approach was always more of what is most beneficial than instead of whether it's right or wrong. That is how I feel. Buddha was, of course, right and wrong is very important too. Right and wrong is what is true, what is not true, what's right, what is wrong is important. But more than that, is this beneficial or not? Is it helpful or not? Even is a right, even is a truth, by saying it, by sharing it, is this going to help or not help? That is the way, we have to decide and think, if it's going to make things worse, that is not something we want. And therefore, even in the teachings of Buddhas, there are, when Buddha was asked at different time by different individuals, whether there is a self or not, he answered three differently at different time, asked by different people with different mindsets. And even though the Buddha has taught of selflessness most of his life, even though that is the truth or reality from Buddhist point of view, even that was what he believed true, but there were times when he was asked whether it is a self or not, he remains quiet. He didn't say there's no self. He didn't say there's self. And because the person who's asking that questions, because of that person's belief and certain belief, strong belief, if he said there is self, he was going to fall in one of the extreme. If Buddha says there is no self, he was going to fall in another extreme. He was not ready. He was not ready to hear. His mind was not ready. He was not ripened to hear either to hear there's no self. At the same time, if there is a Buddha said there is a self, it will only reinforce his already strong grasping of the self. But if Buddha said there's no self, he's going to fall into the other stream because he didn't have the capacity, ability, or he wasn't ready to hear the truth of selflessness in that moment, in that particular moment, in that time. So there are quite few of the teachings called neutral, and when Buddha didn't say either this or that, and remain kind of neutral, And because again, he was more concerned with it by saying, even if it's the truth, there is no self, it is not going to help that person, instead harm that person to become so extreme because he or she is not unable to grasp it fully, the reality, the fact, he or she is not ready to understand and grasp the truth at that point. So it was more better. And then there were times, when he was asked, and then he said there is a self, but not the sense in an independent self, but a self. And again, if he said that moment in that person's, because of that person, again, state of mind and their understanding and their ability and that in that very moment, then again, if he was say there's no self, then again, there's a danger of that person falling into nihilism and totally kind of, totally fall in the extreme. And then in those cases, Buddha said there is self, but in a sense of different ways, And so and there's so many approaches like that, in so many different approaches like that in Buddha's, and it's a skillful means of helping and benefiting individuals in individual moments. Even with many of the rules and regulations, it changes. It's never fixed. Many of the rules and regulations for the monks or nuns, it changes from depending on which places, depending on what society or community, depending on all those things, because, again, it was not about this is the only way and this is the truth, therefore everyone has to do that, follow that. Always not the case. It's more of what is most beneficial, helpful in the moment and in the long term, short term, long term, and that is the more kind of driving force, that intention, motivation to be helped and to benefit and not to hurt and harm the others, and with that intention, motivation, and then what step should I take, that should be always the case, instead of feeling, oh, I'm right, where our motivation is selfish motivation, self-grasping, oh, I'm right, I'm correct, my view is truth, my view is based on fact and truth. it's not about really, coming from the state of trying to help and benefit, that is coming from state of grasping to our view, our ideas, our truth, all of that, and so that's where a lot of time we get in argument, If we have it comes from the best intentions, even we share something, something that maybe we have different view, different ideas, even we share it, even we express it, if it offend the other persons, and if that person doesn't agree with that, and then they try to defend themselves, we'll just back up, Oh, now I understand. I don't need to engage more in that discussion anymore, So you stop the argument, it's done. Instead of then trying to defend your views, your ideas, your truth. That is what we do. Then we start to defend. And then that is where the argument becomes bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger. And especially that can happen, like a fire that catch up and out of control, especially when that kind of discussions or arguments coming from kind of from the space of trying to help and benefit each others, but when it's coming from the space of grasping to the idea that I'm right, grasping to strong grasping to our view, belief, our truth, all of that. So stay clear of quarrel of any kind, yes, even in my cases, sometimes when people say something and I feel like I want to say something, but I have to be more careful, Instead, just listen it. Just listen it, Just let them say whatever they want to say, Let them have their views, their ideas come in, because by saying, it just only lead into arguments. Sometimes it is good to share, because if the other person is kind of open-minded, they are willing to listen to other views, other ideas, their mind is peaceful, calm, in that state, their mind is not kind of disturbed, but their mind is kind of calm, peaceful, and willing to have a more kind of, with an open mind, willing to kind of have a real good discussions. So those can be helpful discussions. Healthy discussion, helpful discussions. But sometimes, the person's mind is agitated, because they are so upset of something, frustration, anger, and so then there is no point in kind of trying to have that in that moment, And sometimes people's mind, they have already made up their mind. They have already made up their mind in certain issue, in certain points, in certain things. They have already made their mind. Their mind is not open to hear other opinion, other views. So in those cases, there's no point in trying to convince them and trying to, even we believe that we have the fact and truth and reality, because that doesn't make things better. It only makes things worse. And so, and then next line, and be patient and always forbearing, So always practicing the patience. It's so important quality that we need, inner quality, the practice of patience, tolerance in our life, being patient with others, being patient with ourselves, being tolerant with others, being tolerant with ourselves. It's very, very important. Sometimes we become impatient with others. Sometimes we become impatient with ourselves. Either it doesn't matter which object you become impatient, whether you are impatient with yourself, whether you are impatient with someone else, whether you are impatient with some kind of, situations, still, when you are impatient, your mind is very much disturbed, agitated. Doesn't matter what object it is, doesn't matter what the object of your impatience is. Basically, when you are in that state of impatient mind or impatient feeling, then, you are in not peaceful state. You are not in calm state. You are not peaceful state. Your mind is very much disturbed, agitated, And that impatience lead to many other negative emotions, frustrations, anger, and slowly hateful, and all of those arises. All these different negative emotions could arise from that being impatience. So we have to be more realistic. Unrealistic expectations, hope, wish, and all of that can lead to impatience. And so we have to be learned to be more realistic, to have more realistic, even though we have expectation, hope, to have more realistic. And we are more realistic, we will be less impatient. We will be less impatient. Lot of time, even when you are improving, whether it's yourself or whether it's someone else or whether it's the situation itself, even though it is improving, even though it is progressing, sometimes we can still be impatient about all of that. Because we have too much unrealistic and high expectation and hope. So the progress that is being made is not up to our expectations. Even is in the right directions, but instead of appreciating that, instead of appreciating, feeling good, at least there is improvement, at least there is some progress. Whether it's the situation, whether it's yourself, whether it's someone else. Appreciating and feeling grateful because there is some progress, because there is some improvement. Instead, we become very unhappy, impatient. Unhappy because impatience. And because that unhappy impatience comes because we have too high expectations. And that is not being met. And that is not being met. And then we become more negative, negative towards ourselves or negative towards others or negative towards the situation itself, all of that. And become very impatient. And slowly, if we don't take care of that impatience, slowly, that turn into the frustration. And if we don't take care of that frustration, slowly, that fuel for anger. And slowly, if we don't take care of anger when it's still small, level, then it turns into hateful feelings, really very, very, very strong negative feelings, and that can kind of eat up, your virtues and your mental state, as well as your physical state, and so, and then you become danger to your own life and danger to others' life. When we have that kind of such a powerful hatred feelings, when we had, because we didn't take care of when we were starting with impatience, frustration, anger, then slowly it becomes so consumed by that feeling, it becomes so strong, hateful, hatred and hatred feelings. And when one is in that state of mind, then one becomes danger to others' life and your own or yourself, or both. Never know when it's going to explode. Never know the result of that explosions, how it will end up, how explosion of that hatred will end up. Sometimes it will end up being very violent and danger to someone's life. Sometimes it end up becoming very violent and danger to your own self. Sometimes both. But whatever different possibility, different result that can be, none of them has good result. None of them is nice. All of them are very painful and unfortunate and consequences. So since we don't want to be in that, anger, hateful, frustration, impatience, the way to deal with that is practicing the patience, learning, training our mind, to not get disturbed and upset by either by yourself, your actions, or whether it's by someone or someone's actions, or due to certain situations, In practicing patience from any point of view, by applying different practice, different method, different way of contemplations, different way of method, different way of meditations to practice patience and overcome the impatience, anger, hatred. If we can be patient, then we can be much more happy, more peaceful, and we can do more. We can contribute and be more help and benefit to others. Whether it's certain individual, whether it's the society, the world, the country itself, we can do much more when someone is more patient. When their mind is more calm, peaceful, and patient, instead of their mind being angry and upset and frustration, impatient, and so forth. So we can do better and best for ourselves and others. And so therefore, it requires a lot of, it requires practice and time in order to overcome the impatience and to develop patience, the mind of the patience. For example, of course, you can, if you read all these Lamrim teachings, you will find many detailed and extensive different meditations. And if you read, Shantideva's Guide to Both Way of Life in chapter 6, you can go and find so many different way of analyzing different meditations from different angles, looking at things from different angles, and how we can train to be more patient. And so, for example, in terms of situation itself, when something unpleasant situation, when something doesn't go the way we want, something doesn't turn out the way we want, and like that, things happens in our life, when many different time, and we encounter different challenges, different problems, different painful situation time to time, and if we are unable to kind of digest the situation in a more positive way, but if we see everything from the negative point of view, negative side, then definitely that will lead to more impatience, more frustration, and that will lead to more anger and that. But even though it is challenging, even though it's painful, even though it's difficult, but still there are something positive. There is always something positive in that, or positive from out of that. Something that positive things come out of that painful situations, like that. And if we focus our mind more on the positive side of that, more on the positive side of that, then we will be less. There will be less frustration. There will be less impatience, and that will help us to be less anger and less hateful. And once on one side is a painful, difficult challenge. On the other hand, because of that, something positive is coming, something positive is happening. So you just kind of try to not only focus on the negative and painful side, but also on the other positive side, or the possibility of the positive side. And so by depending on where you direct your energy and your mind, the focus of your mind, that will affect what kind of feeling, emotion that could arise. And so that is, as we have already discussed, one way of looking at those things is, from karmic point of view, when something happen to us, we try to think, it is purifying a lot of negative karma, negative energies. So it is a good sign, so that we don't have to experience the result of all those negative karma in the futures. So it is a positive sign. So when you see it is a positive sign, even though it's painful, at the same time, in the long term, even though it is painful, it is difficult in this moment, going through that, but in long term, it's a helpful, beneficial, because you are purifying so much negative karma that in long term, you don't have to experience all of that. So you see something positive in that, and that will make your mind more kind of accepting. And by that, there will be less kind of aversions and frustrations towards that. And then that means there's more peace in your mind. And then it doesn't lead to this frustration, anger, and all of that. So, and also, also seeing, all these challenges or painful situations and difficulties are part of our life experience, that they are needed for our personal growth. Those are needed in our life for our own personal growth. Otherwise, we never learn. Through those difficult challenges, situations, difficulties, that we learn. It's just like in children's. when they learn to walk, they fall. They get up and they walk and they fall. They get up and they fall. And that is part of their learning, Only through that, then they will learn to they will learn to walk and stand up, If they don't go through that, then it will be, they will never learn how to walk, Same thing, all of this, even though sometimes the challenge, difficult, the painful situation is so, even though it feels so overwhelming, so big, feel like we can never overcome it, but we can overcome it. We have overcome many of the similar situations in the past, even though it's not exactly the same situation, but similar situation. And we even felt at that moment that we might not be able to come out of that, but we have come out of that. And so with this, And so again, so seeing something positive instead of seeing is not never going to pass, but knowing that this will pass, it is not going to be there all the time. So seeing the positive side of that, seeing that this is a part of our growth, part of our learning process, which will come very handy in our later part of the life, And I personally, in my own life, I personally feel that very much that, many of the challenges, difficulty that I went through, and not only me, many of those, children's, that part of the world, many of the monks, growing in that kind of challenging or difficult situations, I think has made us more stronger. And physically, and I think emotionally, it has made us more stronger. So I think we have developed certain kind of, ability to not to be kind of, too overwhelmed and make it too negative and too depressed and all of that by encountering different challenges and different problems in your life, time to time, whether it is a physical challenges, whether it is sometimes emotional challenges, sometimes it's a, different other kind of challenges, I always go back, and see, it's not easy, it's difficult, but compared to what you have gone through, this is not so bad. Compared to what you have gone through in the past, this is not as bad. And just having that kind of, that you have experiencing something much more worse than that in the past, and you have come out of it, and you have been able to overcome that, and so feeling, compared to that, this is not a big deal, Definitely there is some discomfort, definitely there is some difficulties, definitely there is that, but it doesn't kind of overwhelm you and kind of, totally kind of knock you down and become so negative about it, and instead you can just move on, and so, and those are the same thing, everything that those are the things that come in handy. The challenge, the difficulty you went through come into your life handy in the latter part, And I don't know, sometimes I wonder, nowadays, many of the children's, they grow up without as much difficulties when they are young, and then when they become an adult and when they face some challenges, then they don't know how to handle it. In that sense, I'm grateful for my parent. Just let us to take care of ourselves, all the challenges. They were not for us there all the time. We have to figure out, we have to stand out ourselves, we have to do ourselves, as much as, but that has helped. And so, and even in my own families, like my niece, nephews, of course, situation has improved financially in the families, and sometimes I tell my brothers, we shouldn't make everything so easy for them now. If you make everything too easy for them because you have the possibility to make it, that will make them not ready to face the problem that they will be facing and challenges that they will be facing in later part. They have to by themselves. They have to stand up for themselves. They have to take care of themselves. The parent can't be there all the time. So you have to teach them now, instead of protecting them all the time. So then because you are protecting all the time, when they are by themselves and when they face some challenge and difficulty, they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to protect themselves because they have never learned those. And that is similar. That is what I'm saying. That is similar even in our case. All different challenges and difficulty we face now, even though it is, we wish that we don't have to face that. But facing that can be very, very helpful tools that we can develop. From that we can learn and develop strength that we can use in our later part, to handle much more difficult and challenging situations. So we are talking about the patience, being patient with all different kind of challenges, difficulties, painful experience that might and could encounter in our life at different stages. And so seeing is something more positive as a way of training ourselves. It's like a child going to a school, even you don't want to go to school, even you want to play all day, but going through a little bit of hardship, giving up the happiness of playing all day and not studying, but going for studies because that is going to be helpful to your life in the futures. And similarly, that's how we try to look at that all situation like that. Is like going to, as much as you don't want to have that suffering, just like the children doesn't want to go to the school, they just want to play, enjoy, just like that. Even though we want everything so just perfect and good, no challenge and no difficulties. But going through that is part of that we learn. We need to learn. We need to go through so that we really. So that that can be very beneficial and helpful in the futures. Okay, then next one, the next verses where it says, "Don't flatter or be a fickle friend, but be steadfast and reliable all the time." Again, it is practical, nice advice. once we create friendship, whatever kind of friendship that it might be, it can be friendship between wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, two partners. It could be friendship between children and parents. It could be friendship between different friends. It could be friendship between teachers, students, all kind of different friendship that there are in the world, all kind of different friendship, Once we build up the friendship, then, is important to have a more steady, reliable friendship, where you can rely, trust each others to be there for oneself when it is needed or when it's being asked, I would say probably being needed and when being asked. Sometimes, the problem with us is we might need a help. We never ask help and feel like they never reach out. And they are not help, they are not friend in needs. Do you get it what I mean? You feel like they were not a friend in the needs because they were never there when I needed. But a lot of time they didn't know that you were needed because you never asked them. You have asked them and still they don't help, then you can say, then you can feel and you can say, they were never for me when I needed. But a lot of time, we don't ask them, we don't tell them, and they are not aware. And then in our mind, we just keep on going, pity me, nobody loved me, nobody cared about me, nobody looked after me when I'm this and that, nobody's there. Because nobody called me, nobody came to see me, nobody did this and that. But they didn't know. We don't have omniscient mind. We don't have clairvoyance. Cannot see what is happening there. And so basically, so basically that is where I think, of course, we all have that problem, asking for help is when we really need help, asking for help. I think we all have, some people have more bigger problem than others, and that is one of the problems. And it is not only not asking the help. The problem is then you don't ask problem, and then in your mind you create all these stories, as though they know my problem and they never came to me to help. That is the problem. I think that is the much more worse problems, And then you started to feel they are not good friends, they are not trustworthy, and and you create distance in your mind, bad feelings, and all of that, But anyway, trying to, once you build up relationship, whatever relation it is, whatever kind of friendship relationship, there is always going to be some challenges in every relationship. No relationship is going to be smooth, whether it's between two girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, wife, husband, siblings, among siblings, amongst parents and children, among different colleagues, friends, among teachers and students. There's always going to be, because we all are human beings with the unenlightened beings. And there's always going to be some kind of challenges and difficulties. But true friendship and true steady friend is, even in those difficult times when we have differences and when we are trying to figure out, how to stop that and not just giving up because of, the small challenges and difficulty here and there, and that is what, fickle friend will be, where you are there as long as everything sounds just good. And the moment it's a little difficulty and you have nothing to do with that. I'm done with you. Our friendship in here. I don't want to get involved. you know. I'm there as long as there's, you know, no problems, you know. And so that, and in that kind of relationship, if we engage in that, then, you know, we end up becoming like that all the time. We can never get along with any good friend forever, you know. We keep on changing, thinking that person's better. And then after some time, finding that is not the case and thinking that is the better. And so that is same in any kind of relationship, even with a student and teacher, even in colleagues, different friends, you know, families. And that is always, you know, always expecting the other ones to be perfect and not to have the problems that I'm facing with this particular person now. And there's no problem until you started to get to know each better. You know, from distance is easy. You know, from distance is easy to be friend. That is why I think a lot of time nowadays where the world has changed, where people have friends on social media, because it's so easy to be good friend on social media, but hard to find friends in the persons. Because in persons, when you are together, you know, it's not going to be so smooth and easy all the time. But I don't think that's being a friend on social media and not being a friend in a person. I don't think that is a healthy friendship. You know, it's not true and healthy friendship. You know, and especially, you know, yeah, it's easy to like someone's on social media. You know, they post everything, say nice things, send the heart and everything. Is hard to do in the persons when you are face to face someone you know. So mm, so yeah, and building that kind of steady friendship doesn't mean that you have to be in kind of contact all the time, you know. We all have a steady friendships. Some of them that we have still very close. Probably we don't even have contact with each other now for many years. But there is really good feeling about our friendship. And if you meet after 20 years, 30 years, still you can continue as where you left. You know, as though that you have not been, as though that you have not seen for 30 years, 40 years, but as though you just saw yesterday and you are two together, you can continue and just be as, because there is such a true feeling of friendship and a good feeling to each others. So you might not be calling each other, you might not be texting each other, you might not be emailing each other, you might not even know each other where you are, but then suddenly you meet somewhere or you hear something, and then when you hear it, there's so much joy, happiness, and you just can continue as it was before, as though it, and such are the really steady friendship, you know, instead of ending up bitterness, you know, at the very beginning, or no, oh, you are everything, you know, you are my best friend in this, and then after some time we get some argument, we have some differences, and then, you know, you are the worst friend, you know, or you are never friend, you just deceived me, you know, it was just a deception, you know, all of that. So we don't want to, so not to end up that kind of bitterness, you know. So when you're more steady kind of friendship, then we don't end up that kind of bitterness. But when we have that kind of trying to, you know, flatter, you know, like just in front you're trying to be nice, but inside you don't feel that way, you know. In the front you say nice things, you try to express nice things, you say good things, try to show nice things, but inside It's just trying to impress that person. That's flattering, trying to impress that. And such does not, in long term, and it is not so much healthy. One of the things I truly believe and say is, we don't have to say bad things about others. We don't have to say bad things about others. We don't have to think bad things about others. We don't have to say bad things about others. At the same time, we don't have to flatter all the time someone to impress someone, You don't have to say, oh, you are so externally or this and that. When inside you don't feel that way, You don't have to say bad, neither you have to say all these things unnecessarily. That is one of, especially when you don't really mean it. It only to just kind of impress someone. I personally feel is unhealthy. Because then after some time, people end up what to trust, what to not trust, what other people says. Are they saying from their heart, or are they just trying to say nice things just because they want to make you feel good? And so then that is where lose of the trust. When someone says something, you don't know whether they are saying from their heart or if they're just trying to be nice, and not being able to trust is difficult, and that is because we overly do a lot of those things, So anyway, okay, thank you. So we'll do the dedications. Thank you, and then we will finish the rest of the verses next week, and then we start with another text subject. May all beings everywhere plagued by suffering the body and the mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtues of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depressions. May the blind see form and the deaf hear sound. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those who with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicine be effective and wholesome, prayer bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever disease they are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be free. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you very much, everyone. So have a wonderful rest of the day, the week. Thank you.
Thank you.